tried and true V-twin 1100cc carbureted motorcycle. Really basic, pretty tough rims on it, dual disc up front, single disc on the rear, hydraulic brakes all around, of course. This thing is an older 2003 XV1100. It's a nice looking bike. They had some nice styling cues of these things. Cheap, popular, reliable. What more do you want? Pretty basic motorcycle. It's a twin carburetor on this. It harks back to the days of the Vrago. It's sort of a carryover from the Vrago days for sure. See, once you get the carburetors off and you get all these beauty pieces off, the motor starts looking suspiciously like an old Vrago 1100 engine, which I think that's pretty much what it is. But anyways, XV1100, these were really good ironed out motorcycles. They just kept rehashing this old engine. I don't think there's a lot of differences between this engine and the old Vrago engine. They've done some styling differences and they've probably changed a few things internally. Hardly worth getting into. Dead reliable. Just keep changing the oil. The only goofy thing with these 1100s is that they put the oil filter behind the exhaust pipe. So if you want to do an oil change, you got to drop the exhaust pipe and get the oil filter out. It's buried behind the exhaust. This isn't actually the oil filter. The oil filter is down here under. So you take this cover off and then there's another cover under the cover. So you got to take off the exhaust, then the cover, then another cover, and then the oil filter comes out. So that was pretty goofy. You could buy a oiling kit for these things. External spin-on filter. They go on the front here. But yeah, pretty goofy. The pipes weren't too bad to take off, actually, once you got the hang of it. Other than that, there wasn't really a lot of complaints about them. They were a budget bike. The handling was, you know, it was okay. It's a cruiser. If you treated it like a cruiser, it was pretty good, actually. The oil changes were goofy, for sure, and cost more at the dealer. If you went into a dealer with this thing, I mean, they had to drop the pipes, and then they'd give it to some newbie, and and they would put the pipes back on and crooked, and then it would be sucking air and back popping and deceleration. This one is back popping on deceleration, but it's not because somebody put the pipes on wrong. This little retainer for the rubber diaphragm, that's the way I found it in the bore. So that probably isn't good. You can see these are shrinking. These are supposed to be closer together, and a lot of times you pull these apart and they're so far apart they start coming off the shoulder there. But these aren't supposed to be. Well, see how that one is, and then this one, that's how I found it. So I'm not sure what's going on here. Somebody's been ham-fisting the carburetors. AIS system, the air induction system that Yamaha fitted to a lot of their cruiser bikes back in the day, and other bikes, including the R1s and they had pair valves, he also called it, etc., etc. Anyways, the vacuum line's rot. I'm going to remove it today, but I'm going to take the AIS system off it, and then we're going to take it for a run, and that back popping has totally gone away. So that's pretty cool. Really kind of, it's not a big deal, the back popping, but it is annoying. It was actually sucking air through the AIS system and causing that grief for the owner. These are nice little bikes when you start looking around them. They got a lot of nice things right from the factory, including the paint was pretty nice, the chrome was pretty nice, a lot of nice styling cues to it. They got a real frame back here. They imitated the Harley Davidson under the motorcycle shock. If you look way under here, it actually doesn't run parallel with the bike, but it runs like a normal shock. But they imitated that soft tail looking swing arm, but without the belt. Of course, this has a shaft drive. This has got the AIS system that Yamaha calls it, that somebody has tried to disable. There's the vacuum line that used to go into the vacuum actuated style plunger that would open up the fresh air going into the exhaust. And somebody's done this little plumbing trick, and you can see it's broken here. You can see the carbon down on this little bit, and it's obviously leaking. And the reason he's brought it in is because it's back popping through the exhaust on deceleration, which is pretty common. They got these pipes and they lead into the cylinder head and they go all over the place. The best thing to do is plug them right up at the cylinder head and get rid of the whole thing. If you're going to do this AIS Removal Air Induction System, the acronym is, I don't know why they have to put acronyms on everything. They just get old. They tired, the vacuum lines rot, and then they cause problems. You start sucking air, and then the bike runs poorly, bad idling, bad takeover. And yeah, it's a common thing, especially on these cruisers. And the reason it's particularly notorious on these cruisers for the rot vacuum lines is a lot of times they don't actually get driven. They're kind of an image-driven product, I suppose you could say. And so, you know, there's a lot of posing on these things, and which, you know, whatever. Everybody's into different things, but these bikes, they don't get ridden as much as they should. You can find a lot of these old examples kicking around in people's garages with under 20,000 kilometers on them, and they just don't get ridden. But in terms of being a good bike, I mean, a lot of these Yamaha, Kawasaki, Suzuki, Honda cruisers, they don't get ridden, and they're actually, you know, they're really good bikes, Japanese bikes, so low kilometers though, and they tend to sit and rot. So be aware of that. If you're buying a bike, low kilometers, it's almost better to buy one that's been ridden a lot than something that's been sitting. So just a couple tips on taking the AIS system off this bike. Here's all the mess of pipes that I took off, and this one here, you can see it used to hold the clutch. There used to be a bracket here, and I just cut it off and then put it back into the engine so it holds the clutch cable nicely in place so it's not flapping in the wind. This thing here can go in the garbage. Unbolt it, throw it in the garbage. No need for it anymore. The piping on the other end, on this end, used to go to the front cylinder and rear cylinder. And this little copper thing came off, and that's where it used to attach to by a hose clamp. And a 45 caliber shell, ACP, it's called, handgun shell, is just slightly marginally bigger. It's a good little item to fit in that hole right down there, just like that. And if you don't have a gun and you don't have any buddies or whatever with guns, you need a shell casing, just go down to their local shooting range. Google shooting range in your city, and these are free actually, and they're 12 millimeter .738, something like that, inches, but they're roughly 12 millimeter, just slightly marginally bigger, and they're made of brass, so they're excellent because they'll squeeze into that hole and seal up the hole. And just put a little JB weld around it, pound it in, let it sit. As you pound it in, it'll just form into the hole and get wedged in there. Take off this cover here, which used to sit here. There's your fuel pump. All the garbage used to sit here. There's your shell casing, pounded into the rear cylinder. Shell casing into the front cylinder. Here's all the crap I've taken off. Hoses, pipes, vacuum operated suction things. Cut the vacuum line and then run it from this spigot here over to this spigot there. I don't know if you can see that. This one right here on the other side. So from the front cylinder to the rear cylinder, just run the vacuum line, tie it across, join them together. Makes absolutely zero difference on the performance on this bike in particular. So good luck. Hope that helps. Shell casings, removing the ACE, getting rid of that annoying back popping on deceleration. So I'm always doing these little videos about the best budget bikes to buy for your money, and I've just ridden a ton of bikes now, an absolute ton of bikes, just countless numbers really, and so I get a chance to drive all these bikes, and you know, some are definitely better than others. They're bikes out there that are surprisingly bad and bikes out there that are surprisingly good. You know, bikes that you wouldn't think are good that they actually are. They hold a lot of attributes that, you know, isn't immediately obvious to the inexperienced rider who hasn't, you know, perhaps ridden a lot of bikes like I have. And so these bikes, like this Cruiser, for example, it's really overlooked. I mean, I throw my leg over one of these, and I think they're okay little bikes. Compared to a lot of the Cruisers out there, it's pretty refined, you know. You could do a long-distance trip with it and be fairly confident that you're going to have a trouble-free trip. It's a very simple bike, not much to it, and it's got good passing power. It's an 1100cc V-twin engine carbureted. You know, very basic bike, very overlooked. So, you know, it looks the part, has some nice styling cues. If you're in the market for a Cruiser, this is probably one of the better used examples out there right now. You can pick these up for, I don't know, anywhere from $1,200 to $4,000, depending on who you talk to and the shape and condition. But, you know, the average price is about $2 or $25, you know, out on the open market, on the, you know, Craigslist or Kijiji or whatever you're shopping on. So good value for your money, and really nothing to report about it. The only thing I do on these is brake pads, fork seals, I do oil changes, and sometimes carburetors from them sitting. Actually, these suffer mostly from sitting. People buy these bikes and they think they're going to ride them, and they don't, and for whatever reason, health reasons or whatever. But they were a cheap bike back in the day. They were actually quite affordable, so they sold in good numbers, and so there's a lot of them around. So don't overlook it. If you're looking for a Cruiser, it's a nice little bike.